In this video, I'll be telling you my thoughts on Saw 2, which centers on Detective Eric Matthews, which Eric Matthews is also the older brother in Boy Meets World. But Detective Eric Matthews, whose troubled history with police corruption, becomes the lever for Jigsaw. He uses it to pull the detective into new moral tests. Matthews learns that his son, Daniel, is trapped with 7 other people in a house rigged with lethal devices and is slowly filling up with a nerve agent. And the narrative cuts between Matthews' tense, psychologically loaded conversation with Jigsaw and the captives in the house who are running around frantic and panicked and attempting to survive the house's escalating traps. And spoilers if you have not seen Saw 2 yet, but the victim's past crimes, many tied directly to Matthews' misconduct, suffers as the group fractures under pressure. And the story builds towards a twist, revealing that the surveillance feed that Matthews has been watching the whole time while interrogating Jigsaw is pre-recorded. And the conclusion of the games that Matthews' son, Daniel, was playing and the other captives had been over for a while, reframing Jigsaw's apparent vulnerability in the situation as he's been caught as part of the larger, deliberate, engineered plans he has. Just like in the first movie where we followed Dr. Gordon and Adam, in this sequel, every trap still forces characters to confront the consequences of their past actions, where in this one, the victim's criminal histories and Matthews' own abuse of power form a web of interconnected guilt, suggesting that the moral decay spreads outwards from institutions as much as it does from individuals themselves. And by the end, showing how Eric Matthews, it's still crazy that how they use that name. Like every time I think of Eric Matthews, I think of Boy Meets World. But his badge, it doesn't really offer him no leverage in this trap that he's in, where he's trying to interrogate Jigsaw, but Jigsaw isn't playing along to Detective Matthews trying to have control over the situation. His instinct to use force on Jigsaw only feeds into his own downfall, highlighting how systems of authority often fall when confronted with problems requiring introspection rather than just pure domination. And the house that the captives are in is wired with cameras, turning the victim's suffering into a performance almost. Jigsaw's calm commentary while they're watching this all unfold to Matthew mirrors our own position while watching this movie. We're watching the violence from a distance while being asked to consider what responsibility that our gaze carries within this. I feel like this movie was the starting point of what made the franchise what it is really. The first movie was simple and was turned into this great twist, but this movie really expanded the franchise into a lot of lore and it really set it up for the other sequels that we got. But by hinting at Jigsaw isn't the only one helping him with these traps, as we get the return of Shawnee Smith as Amanda, who was in the first one, who went through one of the traps as a test, as we find out. I feel like I kind of saw that twist coming because when I saw her in the beginning of Saw 2, I'm like, wait, she looks familiar, isn't she the girl from the first one? But I was like, okay, let me just see what happens. And I was right. I was like, why is she being put through these tests again? But I think this is a good example of how violence can be passed down through manipulation rather than just ideology, and suggesting that extremism like this creates new forms of cruelty over time. Tobin Bell is Jigsaw, not even just when he does that voice, but when he's on screen, he just brings this chilling calmness to this role. Just his soft-spoken delivery while being so psychotic and having this philosophical framing of the torture that he's having go on just gives his character and unsettling gravitas, but then making him feel less like a conventional villain and more kind of a god of his own righteousness. John Kramer, after watching the Saw franchise, he's up here for some of my favorite horror villains. I don't know where he's sitting at the top, but I feel like it's in the close top 5 after watching this franchise. Then we have Donnie Wahlberg as Eric Matthews, who grounds the film emotionally, where his performance captures a man unraveling his son is at stake, and where he gets angry, defensive, and terrified that his past corruption while being a detective is coming back to bite him in the ass. And his desperation in scenes with Tobin Bell as Jigsaw adds a human volatility that I think contrasts really sharply with Tobin Bell's composure, because we find out that he's dying, so he has nothing to lose really. Everything that the detective tries doesn't really scare him or has little to no effect on him. All that he does either helps him more or hurts him more. And Darren Bousman, I think, does really well at expanding the original film's gritty aesthetic into something more crazy but also oppressive as well, where we get this color palette that leans heavily into these almost sick greens and yellows. A part of me thought that was because of nerve toxin that was in the air in the house. I felt like that's why they chose those colors, where it really amplifies the sense of like contamination and also decay. As the house is filling up with more like nerve toxin, like the people in the house that are in this trap are also becoming more panicked, more like fearful, where we see alliances form but betrayals happen, paranoia goes off. Then also with like the rapid fire editing that is like has like this like strobe light effect where they start shaking and like going crazy with like handheld camera work, and then also the extreme close-ups that heighten that claustrophobia. They're just the style of like editing and like camera work in this franchise, starting with like this second movie, I feel like it's like it felt really fresh, and it's just something that I haven't really seen before in horror, and something that I just really enjoy seeing. And then the practical effects, man, like just how amazing they're made, and like the practical effects just help ground the story into like physical reality. And then also the structure of the movie where it cuts between Detective Matthew interrogating Jigsaw and then cutting to the survival of the players, that just creates this like rhythm of like tension that builds toward the twist, and like how it relies on like deliberately withholding information and rearranging the visuals to give that information in the context that goes into the twist. It's just all so brilliant and clever and creative, and I'm just so glad I watched these movies. Another franchise I really need to watch is Hellraiser, which will probably be my next. I'm kind of like going more into like the 90s 2000s era of horror, and after watching this I kind of really do want to. But yeah, Saw 2 really does solidify the franchise identity by scaling up the mythology and expanding Jigsaw's philosophy, and proving that the series can have more elaborate narratives without losing its visceral and like bold and brutal edge. Its blend of these moral puzzles, escalating traps, and twist-driven storytelling is what started the blueprint for the franchise going forward, and now I can see why Saw is so beloved. People have raved about the franchise for so long. And if I had to rate this movie, I'd give it a B+, a 7 out of 10. Let me know what you think about Saw 2 down below. If you enjoy it, if you didn't, I would like to hear your thoughts on this movie. Don't forget to like and follow.